Research shows that over 93% of people building AI workflows either fail or quit within the first 30 days. And here's why. They build these amazing workflows that work perfectly in test, but when it comes time to deploy to production, they are absolutely terrified. What if it breaks in front of your boss? What if someone accesses your workflows who shouldn't? What if you look like you have no idea what you are doing? These are all valid questions. But the crazy part is that once you know these four things I'm going to reveal in this video, you'll never have that panicked feeling again when someone asks to see your workflow. Instead, you'll be the person that everyone comes to when they need reliable AI automation. By the end of this video, I'm going to show you, number one, how to lock down your workflows so only the right people can access them. Number two, the retry setup that prevents 90% of random failures. Number three, error handling that makes you look like a pro when things do go wrong. And number four, the bonus tip that will save you hours of headaches down the line. So ensure that you keep watching till the very end. So let's start with section one, which is the following thing. And it is security. So here's the question that is going to make you uncomfortable. Why are there so many AI automation experts online who can't even secure their own webhooks properly? In fact, sometimes even asking this question provides or gives empty looking faces because it's not something people really think about. And I see this all the time. People sharing tutorials about production ready workflows while using manual triggers and completely open webhooks. If you're using manual triggers or chat triggers in production, you're basically leaving your front door wide open with a sign that says, "Rob me." Anyone who finds your webhook URL can trigger your workflow, access your data, or worse. And honestly, if you're scared to share your automation because you know it's not secure, you are already admitting you're not doing this professionally. So this is I guess, the easy solution. And here's what most people get wrong about security. They think it's complicated. Securing your workflows is actually stupid simple and takes like 30 seconds once you understand how that actually works. So if we were to go over to n8n and have a look at the webhook trigger, over here you will see that we have a few options. First of all, we have the method, we have the path. What we want to look at is this authentication right here. So if I click there, I have the basic auth, the header auth, JWT auth, or none. And this is what most people leave it on. And it is this none. When you have basic auth, you can add your credentials right here. And as you can see, I can create a new username and password. So now if I put in user and the password is test, just as a quick example, and hit save, and I just zoom out right here. If I were to run this, I mean, now it's waiting for me to call the test URL. So let's just grab the URL right here. And now if I listen for test event and I go back and paste that in, it will ask me for a username and password. So this is already head and shoulders better than having no authentication at all. Because now if I don't enter the right information, I get this authorization data is wrong. So in addition to the basic auth, we also have some different types of authorization. We have the header and we have the JWT. When it comes to the header auth, if I go here and just create a new credential, you will see that this is asking me for a name and a value. And this is where generally when you make API calls, you tend to see the authorization as the name of the header and something like, for example, authorization right here. And then you have the bearer. And then you have whatever value you would put right here. So this is or value or API-key. This is how you tend to see it in different documentation. So this is setting a header auth. In addition to this, you have something known as JWT as well. So if I just close out of this, under authentication here, we also have a JWT authorization. So if we have a look at what this looks like, this is where things start getting a bit more on the, I guess, advanced side, if you will. Because here, if I manage to get rid of this, that's very annoying. Here I can add a secret. I can choose the algorithm and how secure this will be. There are sharing possibilities as well if I upgrade my plan. And then there are details about that. So you can make this a bit more secure compared to the normal basic authentication or even header authentication. So there's more that you can do with this JWT token as well. But as I said earlier, even taking 30 seconds to add a basic authentication or a header authentication or a JWT, I mean, it doesn't take long to do that, will increase the security of your workflows. And that's pretty much it. Now your workflow has a password because that means that no password is no entry. And this one step will put you ahead of 80% of people building workflows, including some of those gurus teaching the stuff online. Now, here's something that's going to sound backwards. The secure way most people handle API keys is actually less secure than what I'm about to show you. Most people think hiding their API key in a set node makes it secure, but that is just wrong. And this is what I mean. So let's say we have a trigger, and then we have a set node, and then we have an HTTP request, right? And most people would just do this. So let's call this API key. And then let's say the key is 123, right? And then let's say we're calling an endpoint here, I don't know, google.com or whatever, gemini.google.com/v2, whatever. I'm just coming up with stuff, create image, for example. And then you go to headers, and here, and this is where most people get it wrong, they believe that they can just do this, and then they can pass along that value, right? Authorization, like so. However, the problem is that even though this is importing from a prior node, this information is not secure. So if I were to just download this and then try to re-import it, so import from file, what I get right here is essentially the same thing with the key directly open and showing right there. What instead you should be doing is not to use this edit fields, but instead to save your credentials under the authentication part. And this can also be done from this menu right here. So you can also add a new credential right here just by adding or choosing it right here, right? If I go back here, click on that, under authentication, I can choose predefined credential types or generic credential types. Predefined is all the list that you saw before. And one quick tip that I just learned is that, let's say that you have a Google Docs created document, for example. And here, this is already authenticated with your account, right? Here, this is called Google Docs OAuth 2 API. So if you have an HTTP request node right here, and here you choose Google Docs Auth API, this will pull the information from that previous node, and then you can use the same authentication with a bunch of different options, right? So you have the full HTTP options available to you rather than just what this node would allow you to do. So that's one quick tip right there. However, going back to this, if we have a look at, and let's go back here, have a look at the generic credential type. We can choose what type of authentication we have. So there's a bunch right there, basic, header, or what might be the most common. And let's say we're going to add a header credential. And in this case, we're going to add a new credential. We're going to give this a name of test and test. So now that this has been saved, you can zoom out. Then generally you wouldn't need to send any headers because that is being sent with this header auto account tree. And if I were to delete this and then download the workflow to share with other people, so I'm going to import it from file, this will now, obviously in my case, it will have this because it already exists. But when new people are importing this, they will have to set up their own credentials, which means that you have no open data that is created right here. So in this case, let me just delete this. So creating credentials is the professional way of doing this. You don't want to have open keys that are being shared. You want things to be secure. So use predefined credentials wherever possible. Use the generic ones if you have to. It's cleaner, it's safer, and it makes you look like someone who actually knows what they are doing, instead of someone who watched a YouTube tutorial and called it a day, and then called themselves an expert. Now, let's talk about the thing that probably keeps you awake at night, and this is random failures. And probably you know exactly what I'm talking about. Your workflow works perfectly for weeks, but then suddenly it just breaks for no apparent reason, usually at the worst possible time. And here's a stat that will blow your mind. API calls randomly fail about 15 to 20% of the time, even when the service was working perfectly or is working perfectly at that very moment. OpenAI has a brief hiccup. Gmail rate limits you for 30 seconds. Your HTTP request times out. Any of these can make your entire workflow not just look, but can make your entire workflow broken. And that's not a good thing. If you're like most people, you just accept that automation is sometimes unreliable and you just cross your fingers. But that is amateur thinking. Here's what professional developers know that no-code tutorials don't teach you. Failures are inevitable, so your plan for them needs to include backups. And this is what it looks in practice. So if I go back here, let's say we have an empty workflow here. So let's add a new trigger. So let's delete this. We have a trigger. Let's say we have, I don't know, OpenAI. And let's message an assistant right here. So let's just delete this. Actually, I mean, I can choose a message an assistant. It doesn't make a difference, but yeah, let's message a model instead. So OpenAI, let's message a model. And let's say that this is all working fine, right? I can choose a model right here, GPT, whatever, 4.1 mini. And I can ask it a question. So what is the meaning of life? And I hit execute step. And 9 times out of 10, this will work as expected. So I get the answer right there. So that's all fine and good. But let's say that by mistake, I flip this to expression, right? So even if I execute this step now, this should work as expected because nothing has basically changed. But let's say that by mistake or somehow without even realizing, here I have 2 eyes. So now if I execute the step, as you can see, this just failed. The resource you're requesting could not be found. And it is not unheard of that you're moving stuff around, you're trying different things, and you accidentally hit an additional key on your keyboard, right? And that is why you should have these sort of backups. So what I can do here is just think about my error handling. And here n8n offers this on error setting. So here I can say on error, I can stop the workflow, which is what we got right here. I can continue, or I can continue using an error output. So potentially I want to use that last option because this gives me these 2 options right here. I have the success route, I have the error route. And let's say that if this is successful, I want to send an email to myself. So let's send a message and I send an email to myself. And over here, we'll just use the probably JSON.output, and we'll have to execute to C. And that would be the success route, right? So we need to have a subject, hello. But what happens if, let's actually try and execute this. So if I execute, okay, so this is called JSON, actually not .output, it's slightly different. So JSON.message.content, I believe, yeah. So now we get, if we execute this step, this should work as expected. So we should get an email with the output, which we have. But let's say that, again, I made a mistake here. I inserted an additional I. So now I try to execute the whole workflow. And now what happened, obviously, is I didn't get an email, and this went down the error route. And this can, or is not just limited to me putting in a typo right here. It could be that OpenAI is down. There could be 100 different reasons. So then what I say is, if, let's say, if OpenAI is down, what I could do is, what's it called? Let's use Open Router, for example. I could use Open Router that is connected to an AI agent. So in this case, I can just have a chat model. Let's use Open Router. And then I would maybe use, I don't know, Anthropic Claude Sonnet. So in this case, I can take the same prompt, what is the meaning of life? And let's just define that message below. And then I can just do that. So now, obviously, I need to figure out what the output would be right here. But if I execute this, we've got an error here. It went down this route. So now, over here, OpenAI gave us an error. But if I look at the agent, it gave us an output. Now, the issue is that here, this is expecting a message.content, but here we got an output. So what I could do to fix that is put in 2 question marks and just drag that output. So this, if I run it, let's see what happens. We got an error. It went down the anthropic route. And now, okay, still getting an error here. Let's see why. AI agent, is it 3 question marks? I believe it's 2. JSON.output. Weird. Let's see. Cannot read properties of undefined. AI agent. Send message. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, for some reason, this is still seeing OpenAI as the last node. So what we could do, technically, is just have something like this. Let's see if this works. But then we connect that like so. And let's just try this. So here, let's flip to expression. Let's put in as test. And here, let's put JSON.test. Let's see what we get here. Okay, so the problem is that this is null. Test is null. Okay. Why is that? Agent JSON.output. Why is that being undefined? Okay, so that works. So why not the other way around, I guess, would be my question. Let's test this once more. Okay, so now this worked. And what happens if we don't get an error right here? Execute. Okay, and this works as well. Which is weird, because it should be this or that, right? When we have the double question mark right there. But anyway, apart from that, this sort of workflow now means that whether we run through the route of OpenAI, or if we have an error and we go down the route of OpenRouter using Claude, the same sort of output will go into our Gmail node. So now thinking about it, this is extra. So we can go directly into Gmail as long as we use this formula. But the point is that if we have an error here, we're fine, because we'll use a plan B in order to send that email. And this is where having a plan B really comes in handy. So that is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it could be to go back here to settings, and instead of using error output, you can retry on fail. And this will give you 3 times by default. Retry this 3 times, and you wait 1 second between each retry. Obviously, you can increase that. You can increase or decrease that as well. So there are different ways, different plan Bs, if you want to have a look at it that way, that will allow you to have this sort of plan B, these retries, these delays that can ensure that if it doesn't work the first time around, because maybe you hit a rate limit, maybe something is down, you still get the final output, which in this case would be the stuff that we're seeing right here, right? Because these things do happen. So retrying, having a plan B, this is important. And it is the difference between looking like an amateur, in my opinion, and looking like a pro. Amateurs just hope their workflows do not break, while professionals assume that they will and then plan accordingly. So let's talk a bit more about error handling, because I think this is super important. If you knew exactly what happens when your workflows fail and exactly how it makes you look to your team, I promise you would think twice about deploying anything without proper error handling. And this is one thing that I see many people doing. At the same time, it's good to note that errors are not necessarily failures, but you need to have good error handling in place that makes you look competent when things go wrong. And trust me, as we said, things will and do go wrong. And this is what professional error logging really means. And just a quick story I'm thinking about. A few years ago, I had this workflow break during a client demo. It was one of the first projects that I ever did. And I got no logs, no alerts, nothing. I kept looking at my screen, waiting for things to happen, and nothing actually happened. And that is when I decided to start implementing what enterprise companies do, and that is error logging. This is how the pros handle it. So if we go back here, let's say that we got an error, right? Because of this open AI model failure, like we saw right here. What we want to do is not just have this AI agent take the place of this, so this being the plan B. What we might also want to do is have a log that tells us that we went down the error route. And it is as simple as, let's say we have a Gmail node, we can copy this, and I mean, technically we could just do that, we could do that, and we do that. So now we call this error log. We can send an email here saying error detected. And we say we got an error in this, we got an error in this workflow. And if I flip to expression, I can just say, I believe it's workflow dot, and we have these parameters. We have ID, we have name, and I think we have active as well, which isn't super useful if it is in production, because it would always obviously be active as well. So now we got this information. We got the ID of the workflow, we got the name of the workflow, and we got whether it's active or not. So in this case, it is not. And if we send this email directly to the administrator, the person would know that there is an error and would know exactly which part potentially of the automation is broken. So they would know which part to come to in order to fix the problem. And this is, it's a very quick thing, but it really makes a big difference. Because when you can get a detailed log in Google Sheets with a list of what failed and when someone asks you what happened, you don't say, I don't know, it just broke. You will be able to say, we had an API timeout in the OpenAI step at 2:47 p.m. But our retry mechanism, our plan B, handled it on the second attempt. So there's a lot of data and knowledge that will give you that advantage, right? And I hope that you see the difference, because it's the same failure, but one response makes you look incompetent, while the other makes you look like someone who has their stuff together. Now let's speak about version control. And this is also another important thing. And this is the bonus tip time. I discovered this workflow lifesaver by I guess quite by accident, and is going to save you so much stress. And the question for you is, how many times have you made changes to a working workflow and then it broke? And then you probably spend hours trying to remember what it looked like before, or worse, someone else on your team changed something and now nothing works, but you can't figure out what they did. And I see this happen all the time. People spend hours building a workflow that works, and then 8 hours trying to fix the workflow after they improved something in it. And there is a simple solution to this whole thing. So if I go here, actually to this icon right here, let me just save. And here we have version control. So if I zoom in, you can see all the different versions of my automation that I built or that I saved as I was speaking to you in this video. So we started at 9:39 with the first save, 9:40, 9:41, 42, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole list of versions that I can go back to. If I decide to go back to the first one right here, as you can see, it's just the webhook we had at the beginning. Then we had a different webhook, or a different webhook. If I go back to, I don't know, this right here, we now have the Gmail connected to the AI agent. Before we had the set node. Then we have the set node right there. So all of this will allow you to, if you want, go to actions and then restore this version. So I can hit restore. Now, if I X out of this, you'll see that I'm back to what I had right there. If I wanted to go back to the 10.06 version, or rather this, I guess 10.05, which was the latest version there, I can restore to this version. I can clone to a new workflow, which is super handy as well. I can open version in a new tab, or I can even download that. So I don't even have to restore to that before downloading it. I can just have these versions that I'm saving every, I don't know, X amount of time, so that if I wanted to, I would be able to go back to these versions that potentially were production ready. I was just making a few changes here and there and then broke something. So the thing is, test it, save it, download it to Google Drive, to some sort of backup storage. And if you are doing V2 and V2 breaks, or it breaks everything, you can just import V1 and then you're back to working in 30 seconds. And this simple habit will save you hours of frustration and make you look like someone who actually knows what they're doing instead of someone who's constantly breaking things. And the reality is that we're all breaking things to make things work, but it doesn't have to come at the expense of, I don't know, feeling like you're banging your head against the wall. There is a better solution. So with that all in mind, the truth is that most people building AI workflows are secretly terrified that they're doing it wrong. They're hoping that their stuff doesn't break, praying that no one asks too many questions, and feeling like imposters. But imagine for a second how great it will feel when you're finally experiencing the most confident, complete, and professional automation journey of your entire career. Think of yourself deploying these workflows without that sick feeling in your stomach. Imagine your boss asking to see your work and you are actually excited to show them. And now that you know these 4 things that separate amateur workflows from professional ones, you can secure your webhooks and API keys like a pro. You can add retry mechanisms so that failures make you look smart, not stupid. You can implement proper error logging along with plan Bs so you always know what is happening. And you can use version control so you can always go back to what was working. And these aren't advanced tactics or techniques reserved for coding experts. In my opinion, they're basic professional practices. Once you start implementing them, you'll never have that panic feeling again when someone asks about your automation. You'll be the person that everyone comes to for reliable automation. You'll be confident when people want a demo. And most importantly, I think you'll be able to sleep at night knowing that your automations are bulletproof. And that's what I want for you. So if you found this video useful, hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss future ones. And with that said, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll speak to you in the next video.